Welcome to the Karena Virginia Podcast, where we expect the best and get it. Thank you so much for tuning in with me and Joshua Medcalf. You may know Joshua as the author of Chop Wood, Carry Water. He is also a speaker and a mentor to many. Looking so forward to you tuning in with us for the first episode with Joshua Medcalf now. I have your books. Look at this one. It's here. This is Chop Wood, Carry Water. This one is already falling apart.
Definitely been read a few times.
Yes. And just so grateful that you agreed to come on and share with me. I originally bought Chop Wood, Carry Water for my son, who is someone who loves martial arts and has a sensei who really changed his life. This mentor of his when he was probably 11. And he's actually with him right now as we're recording and may even come home in the middle of it. So that would be neat. I'll have him say hi. Anyway, I bought it for him and I started reading it and I said, wow, this is unbelievable. And that's when I reached out to you and you said, well, you got to get Finish Empty. And I did. And I love them both. And I am probably going to ask you questions that might be a little bit different from some of the questions that you're used to, if that's okay.
Love it.
All right. Awesome. I was so fascinated by so many of the concepts that you shared and the way that you created storylines and the characters instead of it being a typical self-help type of book. But I also was really interested while reading to gather the information on what motivated you to create these characters, the student and the sensei or the mentor, and for you to write from, especially with Chop Wood, Carry Water, to write it from that perspective.
Yeah, so basically I had an experience at Duke where I got exposed to sports psychology. I was a fifth-year senior playing soccer. It was a really transformative experience for me, very transformational. And I was really frustrated with why did I have to get to Duke to learn this stuff? Why isn't this taught to 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds? And I made it my personal mission to get it out to the masses. And that was a long journey. But at one point, IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida had reached out and asked me to head up mental conditioning and leadership. And at that point, I had really kind of got my brand going. I was kind of known as one of the top people in sports psychology, even though I don't have a sports psychology degree. But I was really nervous that if I took that position, they would own my work product. And I knew there was no go-to book in sports psychology. And so I went home from Florida. I didn't really leave bed for a couple of months. And I wrote Chop Wood, Carry Water, and I wrote my memoir, Hustle. And part of that story I had heard as a true story of a guy that had gone out to become a samurai archer, and the story of the sensei hitting the target kind of in the dark. Whether it's true or not, I read it as such, and I thought, what an interesting concept for what if I expounded upon that and really tried to make that bigger. And so originally, the book had been called Start Here, Mental Training Finally Made Simple. And it was just like a 40-page fable that I had expanded upon, trying to think about how do I take these concepts and really infuse them into the story narrative. And then John Gordon read that early script and he said, I think you need to throw the rest of this out and just make that the entire book. And so I worked with a friend who's a screenwriter in Hollywood, and we really tried to take everything that I had learned and shared and what was really important in my journey and what I was finding with all the different, especially at that time, young athletes that I was working with, like what really resonated for them, and really try and, just infuse the story with that and really distill it down to its most simple components. Because part of my frustration was that I felt like there was a lot of people with PhDs that were teaching stuff that they'd read in books and that they didn't really understand from a practitioner in the dirt perspective. And so I really wanted it to be able to, I think it's kind of the Albert Einstein test of if you really know something well, then you should be able to explain it very simply. And I really wanted to try and make it as simple as possible. Simple doesn't mean easy, but I wanted it to be very easily understood, and especially from a young person's perspective. And so that book was really written to infuse these ideas in a 7, 8, 9-year-old's mind.
Yeah.
And from that perspective.
Yeah. And I love that because there are parts of Chop Wood, Carry Water that you really could read to a child.
I have. I've read it to 6-year-olds and they can understand it.
There's so many questions that I want to ask you. And as you're talking, my mind is going in so many directions. I did a little bit of research on you as well. And I know that you went to Vanderbilt first, right? And you played soccer. My father was actually a professional soccer player in Rome, Italy, before he moved to America. And he used to come to our soccer games and teach all my friends, especially my brother's friends, how to do certain things in soccer, but I was never good at sports, believe it or not. But anyway, he had a temper, and it made me think of you because I know the first time you and I communicated, you were in Italy and I was on my way to Italy, and my dad, and you were there for a while, but my father had this, Roman temper. And he said that when he played soccer in Italy, one of the things that got in his way was his temper. And when I heard you saying that in one of your podcasts, it made me think of how different that is from your writings. So what did you do
it's
to
very
stop
shocking
reacting?
to people.
Yeah,
it's very shocking to people. It's still to say I have an incident every week. I had another incident at San Diego Country Club this last week, and the woman tried to throw it in my girlfriend's face of, I read his book and he teaches mental, and I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. And if you think that that's how this is going to go, good luck. But
I love that authenticity though.
Yeah. No, I try and be very authentic and authentically vulnerable about my struggles and shortcomings. My nickname all growing up was Bear. And if you are loving and kind and respectful, I'm a teddy bear. And if you cross certain lines, the grizzly bear comes out pretty quickly. And I have had to learn how to harness that energy and try and channel that, and most of the time, use that in ways that are beneficial and constructive. But yeah, I usually tell people, don't get it twisted. You should ask some people that really know me if you think that I'm this really soft person. That's not who I am in real life. I can be very kind. I can be very respectful, and I do my best to be loving, kind, and respectful. But also, don't mistake kindness for weakness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
your father and I have a lot in common with
I know.
that temper.
I know. I realized that too. Unfortunately, he passed away too young. He passed away at 65, and I miss him every day. I was just texting my sister last night, and I said, I miss Gracie, our dog. And she said, I know. And then she's younger than me. She's my baby sister, but I always act like a child with her. And I said, where is she? And she said, oh, she's with Daddy. And I said, I miss him every day, and she went into the big sister mode, which, we're just kind of joking around a little bit. But yeah, grief is hard, which leads me to another question I have for you. and it's probably going to be surprising to you that I know his name, but your little brother, Jordan, right? Something interesting happens to me often. And for anyone listening to this that's more not one of my followers, but maybe one of your followers, this might sound very weird, but people in my world know this. Ever since I was a child, I have had a very strong connection to the other side, Kevin, whatever we want to call it. And many times when I meet someone or when I'm introduced to something, there is a soul from the other side that has created the connection. So I was wondering if maybe that was the case with you and me. And then I read in your Finish Empty book about Jordan, who was your baby brother and your best friend who passed away way too young. And there's so much grief in that, and especially at such a tender age to lose your baby brother, that grief doesn't go away. So my two-part question is, how do you cope with the feelings of grief? Because I know a lot of your work is about moving through the feelings and just showing up and, chopping the wood, carrying the water, doing the work. And for some of us, like me, who are real deep feelers, a lot of the people who are in my life that resonate with my work, I should say, are also very deep, deep feelers. One is, how do you move through the discomfort of pain and grief and continue to do the work? One. And two, what is your belief in terms of heaven or angels or higher realms? And did you ever receive, or do you receive any messages from Jordan?
A lot of questions in there.
I told you I was going to ask you some serious questions here that were different than what you're used to. See?
It's that aspect of it is fine. There's just a lot of questions in there.
Okay. So let's go back. How do you work through?
Well, let me tell the sort of context. So when I was 9 years old, my baby brother and best friend drowned in our pool at home. My brother was an incredible human being and was very rambunctious. And my mom and I were in the living room and we were sorting through a bookcase. And it'd been a few minutes and we hadn't heard Jordan. And so that was pretty rare. And so my mom knew that he was probably getting into some sort of mischief. And so she started going around the house, Jordan. And she went upstairs and she let out a blood-curdling scream. And I intuitively knew that he was in the pool. And I took off and he was in the bottom of the pool. And I got him out very quickly and then was on the phone with the paramedics. And it was a very traumatic experience because my father had become an eye surgeon and his practice was about 400 yards away and it was right next to the hospital and where the EMTs and fire trucks came from. And my dad had grown up in a trailer park and had to duct tape his trailer together, very abject poverty, and we'd grown up pretty poor. I can vividly remember dreaming about Happy Meals when I was 6, and we were finally starting to get to live on the other side of the American dream. That was part of having the house with the pool, and so we had gotten a hold of my dad very quickly, and he got there pretty shortly after the paramedics did. And he had done residencies for 6 years outside of ophthalmology. And so he was a very amazing doctor in general and had done, stints in the ER and things like that. And so he was very adamant and emphatic that they should bag Jordan and get him to the hospital. And again, the hospital is a 20-second car ride away. And they ended up being in our house for over 20 minutes. They did not listen to my father. They actually had the police handcuff him and take him away. And then afterwards, some of the police tried to stay back and take pictures as if it was a crime scene. And this is in Oklahoma. And so my mom's brother, you can imagine, didn't take too kindly to that. And so I remember him telling them, sure, you can step onto this property, but also you may not make it off of this property if you do step onto this property. So it's just a crazy, crazy day. My brother ended up passing away about 30 days later. They got him life flighted down to Dallas. He had actually been dead officially, but then resuscitated. But then it was, the doctors actually told my parents the lights are on, but nobody's home. Probably not the best thing to tell grieving parents. But so that's kind of the backstory with Jordan. And
I'm so sorry that as a 9-year-old, you went through something so traumatic. I mean, that's trauma with a capital T that is beyond a capital T. I mean, losing your brother and then all of the chaos around it, and
the ancillary stuff around it was very, very, was very wild. And so when you ask the question about grief, I don't, as a kid, you don't know what grief is. You have no idea what's going on. Sadly, and I do believe that I have been one of the privileged few that my childhood was very traumatic, but that trauma has somewhat molded me and shaped me into the kind of force of human nature that I am, and the impact that I've had on the world today, and the ability I have to connect with people from all walks of life goes back to a lot of the pain and trauma that I went through as a kid.
The obstacle can be the way.
Yeah. But there are always, there are aftershocks and after effects, of all of that. But it wasn't really until probably closer to when so I lost two coaches to prison, one that was like a brother to my family who ended up going to prison for, molesting a lot of little boys that were my friends in school that I went to. And then I lost another coach to prison. That was when the first one was 14. The second one was when I was 16. He had killed his wife, tried to make it look like a hit and run to collect insurance money. I wasn't close to him, but he was my soccer coach on my club soccer team. And then my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer when I was 21. And that 21 to 23, 24, 25, in the aftermath of my father passing away, I think that's more where I started to be able to consciously walk through grief and understand it more, and have a better understanding of grief and kind of how to move through that. But when you're 9, there's not grief, there's just life, and there's just chaos, and there's the emotions that you feel. And then, it wouldn't be until I was 32 that I found out that I was on the spectrum. And so I was always weird and different. One of the things that my brother loved to say growing up was, why can't you just effing be normal? And I didn't know any different than, what I was and am. But the grief thing is kind of similar to that for me. If I didn't know, I knew that I had a lot of anger, but I think that I was also wired. We do come from Comanche American Indians in my lineage, and I have that Indian fire in me and a little bit of that savage in me. And so I don't know if the trauma just activated that more, or if that would have been there no matter what. But yeah. And then I do believe in heaven. I don't think that I communicate with people on the other side. I would say more that I have prophetic giftings, is what other people would say that have spent a lot of time in my life, and that move in a lot of those realms. And so what I've learned is that I just trust what comes to me, and I will just say it. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying about what I'm going to say or whether I should say it or not. I just trust that I'm supposed to, which can be very controversial in many different arenas and areas of life, like the country club. And it doesn't always socially make me everyone's favorite, but it does.
Would you say that,
allow me to be very.
Would you say that you don't really have a filter? It'll just will it be a reaction, or will it be just a, an impulse, or will it be that you feel inspired to say something? Because I'm like that also. And I've always been that way. Just sometimes people will say, "Oh, wow, I can't believe you just said that." And I'll say, "Oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have." But I
think it's all. Right? I think it's all of the above, and it's learning how to, again, channel those. Like, I remember I was on staff with UCLA women's basketball for 7 years as the director of mental training, and that ended up looking like me coaching the head coach for the first few years and mentoring a few of the young ladies that had gotten there originally, like around the same time as me. And one of them became like my little sister, Naira Fields. She'd always been told that she was really stubborn. And she said to me one day, "Yeah, I know you and everybody else wants me to not be so stubborn." And I said, "That is not true at all. I love that you are stubborn. What we have to learn and what you have to figure out is how to channel that stubborn energy in ways that are beneficial and constructive. If it's channeled, it's one of the most powerful forces in the world. If it's not channeled, then it can be destructive and disruptive. And so what I've really had to learn how to massage at times and learn how to use a scalpel instead of a sword. And it's more of that I've had to learn with wisdom and experience and maturity of when to unleash all of that and when to unleash some of it. But again, a lot of that still comes back to gut, and I just will trust that, my skill set and experiences, and that I may not understand why somebody creates this thing inside of me. But usually then when I look back, there will be, oh, well, there was this instance, and 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 oh, she also did this, and oh, she also did this, and oh, she also, said that I didn't join this club to make friends, like crazy stuff. And you're just like, and when you add it all up, it's like, oh yeah, that actually does make a lot of sense. Why you would have this guttural kind of reaction and be so frustrated. And, but yeah, it's really getting to that point of trusting that gut and intuition, and just really making sure though that I've again, the lot of trial and error, and well, maybe that was too much, or maybe there's a way that I can say this differently, or maybe I can ask a question and then go into that space, or kind of move through those things, somewhat differently. But yeah, I think it's learning how to channel those.
So would you say that sometimes when you feel angry, there's something in the present moment that has triggered something from the past, even if it's something that's repressed? And so the reaction will maybe feel like it's the present moment reaction, but it's bigger than what is right there because of something from the past?
So actually what I would say is, to me, it's not really triggering. What it is it's usually I understand things about people that they don't tell other people. And so I mirror back to them is what you'll find most often. So if you were to go through, even again, just using the club because it's a funny space, but a person that I'm very close to that I even call my grandpa, one time he got frustrated with me and he's like, you always have a problem. And then when we like got space and I got really emotional, I started tearing up. And when we went through it, it was, no, I don't always have a problem. It's, if you look at the people that I quote unquote have a problem with, they are problematic people who tend to be bullies. And the people that everybody loves, that embody love and joy and kindness and respect, those people never see that side of me. They never experience that. So oftentimes what I'm actually doing is I'm putting a mirror up to people and I am intensely showing them who they are. And that's really uncomfortable for them and sometimes others that are around it. But if you show up with love and joy and kindness and you are just this wholesome, incredible human being, well, then that's what I mirror back to you. And it's a very pleasant, joyful, loving experience. But if especially, I think from I think one of the things it's like an insecure bully thing that I don't enjoy that type of human. And I am comfortable making them very uncomfortable.
Yeah, you give it right back to them. So what about people who pretend to be so kind, but with your discernment, you are aware
doesn't work very well.
It doesn't work well for you. Yeah. Yeah. See, I see right through people also. And I find that to be very challenging because sometimes there can be someone who people will think is so obnoxious and so arrogant, and I'll see right through to the softness of that person as well. And then someone might say, oh my gosh, do you know who so-and-so is? You have to listen to this person speak or read this book. And I'll go, oh no way. You know, it looks good from the outside, and people often say, why do you feel that way? And I'll say, I can't explain it. It's this very heightened intuition. It's annoying.
Yes, you can't explain it until, like, there's a person in my space that has written a lot of books and people would be like, oh, you've got to love this, don't you? And I'm like, I really don't like their writing. And then when I found out about a book that they had written that ended up being one of the first books that they had written, I knew it. You're full of shit and you are a master manipulator. And that's all you're doing is you've taken something that's pure in, mental training and stoicism, etc., and you've packaged it and you're still selling shit. Yep, and I
used to teach a workshop in New York City, and I would teach, and then this is before social media became this big thing. And I would just teach from my heart and just, sort of channel things and speak directly to the space and the energy. And there was a woman that always came to the class, and I recognized her, but she always sat in the back. And then later, people started sending me this woman's blogs, and she would write what she learned in the class. And then she started marketing and really getting into the whole marketing thing, which I was never good at and never really had that as my, gift at all. And then she started taking a lot of the work that I was doing and started writing books, and people were saying, "Do you know who this is?" And I was going, "No, no, 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 no." But I also didn't want to be that person that was calling her out. So I had to work through that and just sort of give it to the divine and just say, okay, you know what? I have to lead from my heart and show up the way that I do. And that's not my way. And for some people, maybe she's really helpful, because she did, what I noticed was she was able to put things in a very simple way and just kind of bullet point things, whereas I tend to go really deep. And so my way's not for everyone. So there is enough room for everyone. And that brings me back to the crab theory that you wrote about, right? And when I read that, I wanted to research the crabs, so that you can talk about this, but how the crabs, if there's just one in the bucket, it will stay. But if there's more, they want to pull each other down. And I was wondering, is this biological, or is this because of, something that just crabs do? I know human beings tend to sabotage others because of fear of there not being enough. And when I go into my very spiritual meditations and that place of deep spirituality, I recognize that we are living in an abundant castle where there is enough for everyone. And that old limiting belief that there isn't is what creates that need to be number one, or to take someone else's information and publish it, as opposed to just trusting this life is so short. We just show up and we do what we can, and it goes, we do our work, but we do what we can to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, knowing that what we really want to do is to contribute to the world being a better place. So I'd love to hear your take on the crab theory and how you approach that in terms of others maybe wanting to sabotage the work that you do.
Yeah. So the way I've always understood it, and I sometimes am terrible about research, so whether it's true or not is less important to me as the truth of it in terms of the human beings. And so the way I'd always heard the crabs in a bucket is that if you put one crab in the bucket, that it can crawl out, but that if you put multiple crabs in the bucket, that they will pull each other down. And then so much so that if one continually tries to crawl out after being pulled down, they'll break its leg. And if you look at human beings are very similar in this regard. And I try and do my best to understand that everybody is doing the best that they can. And that is, however they are moving through the world is most likely a coping mechanism. It is a learned behavior. They are doing their best. And more often than not, I don't think that they are malicious in intent.
Right.
Now, that's easier said than done at times. And what I personally do my best to do is I try and be very protective of my space. And so both, in Chop Wood, Carry Water, I coined the phrase, the fuel for your heart. And that being the 6 things that we all fuel our heart with. And that I believe that we're designed just like, a perfectly designed sports car or, airplane, whatever you want to call it. But that if you put the wrong fuel into that or into the gas tank of your heart, then you're going to get stuck, you're going to get broken down, and you're never going to fulfill your potential. And then you get really frustrated because you're like, I know that I was designed for so much more. Mm-hmm. And so those 6 things are what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, our self-talk, who we surround ourselves with, and what we visualize. And so I try and be very, very conscientious and careful about what I'm fueling my heart with, especially what I'm reading and my circle. And so, at the club theme of this podcast, there are certain people I won't play with. And I've made it very clear to the people at the club that I love, hey, if you want to play with them, no big deal. I'm never going to tell you who to play with. But do know that I do not play with them. I believe that time is very precious. Are you talking
about golf? Is this golf?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's bigger than golf. This is, if you invite me to lunch with them, coffee to them, if afterwards for drinks, like it doesn't matter. It's like life is too short. Time is too precious. Time is the only resource that's the exact same for every single person on earth, whether you live on the street, whether you, are a trash man, whether you are a professor, whether you are a CEO, or whether you are a head of state. We get 86,400 seconds. It's the only resource that's the exact same. And so I try and be very careful of who I spend my time with, both from an influence perspective of I would hope that people are open to understanding who I am and the impact I can have on their life, and then the impact that they can have on my life. And so I'm just very, very anal about who I spend time with. I even feel bad for my partner because there are people that she sometimes would like me to spend time with, and I will give them a chance, which to other people may look like a very short window of time. Maybe it's a few minutes. And if they don't pass that test, then I'm good.
And you have strong boundaries.
I have very strong boundaries around who gets access to me, and especially at this phase in my life. I mean, whenever I was younger, sure, I would be more willing to, spend time with lots of people, but at this phase of my life, it's understanding. And I always knew, given that what happened with my brother, what happened with my father, that, you never know when your time is up, and the time is very scarce. But especially, in my 40s, I'm going to really protect this time. And I say no to most things also, so that when I say yes, that my yes means something, and my yes is really all in, and that I can be fully present, and I can be fully engaged, and I can really invest and be present and not worry about the past, the future, the other priorities and things that are going on. I really try and be present in the things that I'm doing.
Thank you so much for joining this conversation. And I am looking forward to sharing more with you. So please tune in 2 weeks, where we will have part 2 of this conversation. And thank you again for being part of the Karena Virginia podcast. Please subscribe at Karena Yoga on YouTube, also on Spotify and Apple, and make it a great day.